Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Thrive Co-Living Communities YouTube podcast. I'm Mark Stein, Thrive founder and your podcast host. We're creating sustainable, inclusive, and multi-generational residential communities from repurposed big box stores or other unused buildings. By offering unique and ecological co-living options, our aim is to combat the epidemic of isolation, revitalize communities, and help others discover the many benefits of engaged community living. In this podcast series, join us as we discuss co-living and other aspects of our concept, in addition to bringing you interesting people who are doing cool things from around the world. Through this podcast, learn more about our concept and see how Thrive co-living communities will bring together people from all walks of life. To find more about us, visit www.thrivecolivingcommunities.org. Thanks for watching and enjoy the podcast. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Thrive Co-Living Communities YouTube podcast. Always a victory when I get it out. So pleased to have back Bonnie Stith. And I think this is your third time on the podcast.
I think it is my third time, yes.
You hold a distinguished place. Nobody else has been here 3 times. So
I'll start putting badges on it, like kind of like Saturday Night Live, I'll be like the third timer, the 4th timer. Yeah, okay.
How about a sash, like
there you go, like
Scouts?
Like a winner, yes, exactly. Yeah, there you go.
So Bonnie is a coach and consultant, and with Stith Coaching and Consulting .com, and she has a background as a CIA agent, and let's see if I get this right. Her last engagement was with the CIA Center for Cybersecurity. How close?
Cyber intelligence, yeah.
Cyber intelligence.
Yep.
So we talk about everything, offline and online. And the last time we talked, she had a topic that she's been working with, and I could relate to it with Thrive, and I'm sure you can relate to it in your own ways. So I invited her to come on and talk about it. So Bonnie, always great to have you, and always great to chat, whatever the medium.
Great. And thank you for inviting me back. I would just say I wasn't a CIA agent, I was a CIA officer. We just, it's just different terminology. So
define it for us, distinguish it.
Well, I'm not sure. You think about FBI agent, right? Okay. It probably comes down to, just like this, we're not them. They do something different. So, okay. We call ourselves officers. And so, okay. And it might have to do with the military origin of the agency too, is that, just the terminology. So, agents were agents of a foreign power. We're not agents of a foreign power. In our minds, we're officers. So,
and wouldn't it go with intelligence? You're an intelligence officer. Is that how?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
So I never thought about it that deeply. I just knew that's not a word we use for ourselves. Sure. Agents are the people that we run that sell us secrets or provide us secrets. So.
Okay.
So we're in charge. So we're always in charge. So. Which is a really nice segue into this. How do you be in charge in a time when change is happening and you can't control it, right?
Okay.
So, which is, we started off, offline, we were talking about really this whole disruption that's been going on around us all the time. And that we are noticing in such a big way, because it's like, happy Groundhog Year. The change is still here. When is somebody going to stop this thing that's happening to us? There was an interesting article in the paper the other day, the Washington Post, that made the point that, the 1918 pandemic didn't end in 1918. The Spanish flu. It actually went on 4 years afterwards. And so this idea that, that 2020 was going to be the year, well, it went on for at least 3 years. Magic number. Surprise, it didn't end. And, I remember, thinking, well, when this vaccine comes, of course, people will get vaccinated. Surprise, not everybody got vaccinated. And so it's like this constant, like, and so you imagine, I mean, all of the arguments that are going on with family members, and, how many families separated over politics, in the last, political season, or are still separated over politics in the current political season. And then how many families now have separated over vaccinations in the pandemic season? And what is all that doing to us? I mean, what is happening to us with all this change going on that we can't control? So if we can't control something, then we try to control something else. And
by the way, everybody, excuse me just a second.
Yeah.
We're in February of 2022. Just to say,
which could be February of 2020 in some respects, right? Except we've got a vaccine, which some of us will take and others won't. Right. So, hello. Oh yeah, and Russia might invade Ukraine, and the Olympics are going on. So, like, look over there. It's a strange time in our history, our collective history, and I'd say in the history of the world in many respects, right? Because there's this radical change that has occurred in our everyday lives. I mean, to go out masked or go out unmasked. I mean, we're fighting over whether masks work or not. What are we really fighting about? I mean, it's the thing that we can control. Well, I can control whether I wear a mask or not, and you can't make me. I thought there was a really strange oxymoron that occurred in Washington, D.C., where on the one hand, you had the anti-abortion march, which never would have a slogan that says, my body, my choice. Okay. It's like your body, our choice. And then that afternoon, those same people showed up with a my body, my choice, you can't make me vaccinate, like, signs. And I was like, is it just me? Or like, or like, is it like upside down, inside out day? It was just so strange. But, but I think what we're seeing is this reaction to, I can't control certain things, but I'm going to try to control those things I can. However weird it gets in my need to control it. And so, the question I would ask is, what would it look like to accept that you can't control anything? Well, some people it looks like chaos. Because, I mean, I will tell you, I'm a controlling person. I mean, it's been one of my, as I've gone through coach training and a lot of the different things, I mean, it's one of the saboteurs that I recognize in myself, that my need to have control over things. And so what does that create within me with things like this? I mean, what's it like to not be able to control when your whole body says you must control? Your brain is like, you must control. There's certainly this rejection of the notion that I can't control it. And so I walk around with a state of like disassociation, like, no, of course I can control this, but can I really? There's the denial that comes on. It's almost like grief, the steps of grief. There's that denial piece. This is just not, I'm angry about this. And so how does that anger manifest itself externally? I mean, how does it manifest itself internally?
Let me give you a good example, and one that's always tickled me when I've seen it. You're at the airport and your flight's been canceled due to weather or whatever. And you've got the guy that's up at the desk saying, but you don't understand. I have to be in Kansas City by 2:00 today. And you need to do whatever you need to do to get me there.
That's right. And figure it out. That's right.
And he's irate and he's pounding on the desk and he's embarrassing everybody around him. And he thinks that this tantrum is going to get him to Kansas City. And he's in San Francisco, and it's 3 hours from now that he's got to be in Kansas City. Well, I learned a long time ago that the only element of control that I have is getting myself to the airport, getting my bag checked, and getting to the gate area by the time that it says on my mobile phone, used to be ticket.
Yeah.
And beyond that, I've got zero control. And if I can rent a car and drive to where I need to go, then I have a little bit of control, but that guy's not going to get there in 3 hours from San Francisco. So,
Yeah, and oh, by the way, COVID. Okay. Because not only could the weather get you now, but everybody's sick. I mean, this Omicron thing is like, I mean, it is, I think it's like gone through like cholera. I mean, it's, you think like that. It is. I mean, if you haven't had it yet, you probably will. I mean, I will just tell you that, I will attest to that. Vaccine worked as advertised. I mean, I got a really bad cold and didn't feel good for about a week. And I've done everything I can to try to like mask up and do all these other things, but it'll get you. Again, out of your control, right? Control all the things you can, but then you wake up and you go like, I don't feel good. And I really feel like this is not what I'm used to getting when I get a cold, so I'll test, I'll do the home test. Well, the home test says negative. Yeah, but I don't believe it. Well, I'll test again tomorrow. It still says negative, but these symptoms just aren't what I'm used to. And so, so then you go and you get the test done and it comes back positive and you're like, well, of course it is. Are you surprised? I mean, you knew it wasn't negative. You knew it was positive, but, but I just keep controlling it with like this home test that tells me it's negative. But I mean, I had a decision to make. Did I go to a theater to see a play, knowing in my heart and in my head, more point, that I had COVID, even though this home test said negative? And to go to the theater, I had to show a vaccine card. So, well, I could say, well, I tested at home and it was negative and I've got my vaccine card. How would the other members of the crowd there feel if I walked in and exposed all of them to this virus? And so,
especially if you were coughing half the time.
Actually, it was sneezing, believe it or not. It was
worse.
Incredible sneezing. I mean, the worst kind of sneezing. So yeah, it was one of those things where you just like, this is not how I usually am sick. Therefore, this thing that becomes your worst nightmare is actually playing out as your worst nightmare. You can't stop sneezing. So, so it was really, what is it that I can do about this other than manage the best I can to the uncertainty of what is happening. So to take your experience of the plane, I had to be in Tulsa in December, but because I'm paying attention, I know that the airlines are even more unreliable now than, in normal times, because they are subject to weather. They are subject to breaks. Planes break, people don't show up. There are things that get in the way of it. So I had to be in Tulsa, but I knew that I needed to be online that night to teach a class. And I'm a creature of like, if I have an obligation, I'm going to be there. So rather than taking a later flight and cutting it a little close, getting to Tulsa to be able to teach a class, I took the earliest flight out I could. Of course, my plane was delayed, but of course, I missed my connecting flight, but of course. And as I was sitting on the ramp there in Dallas, because they couldn't get the concourse, the jetway out to the plane for whatever reason, we were late, then the gate was occupied, and then they couldn't get the ground crew to come get to the plane. It was like the worst nightmare if you were running late, right? Imagine if I had scheduled it with precision timing. It would be my worst nightmare. And my thought was like, golly, I'm gonna have to run all the way across Dallas, Fort Worth Airport, and I'll still miss that flight. How am I feeling about that? And up on my screen pops this thing from American Airlines that says, hey, you want us to book you on the next flight? And I was like, I left early. I have plenty of time. The next flight gets me there early enough. It right now is leaving on time. I'm not going to make that other flight. Well, of course I do. So I just pressed yes. Just rolled me to the next flight. And so I got off the plane, because that means I could just feel my whole blood pressure and everything just kind of settled. Walked off the plane, wandered around for a minute. Got to my gate in a leisurely fashion. My plane left on time, and I still got to Tulsa 5 hours ahead of time. Because I anticipated those things that would be out of my control, but would exercise my need to control And I tried to alleviate them as the best I could. And because I did that, of course, got my car, went and got, an early dinner, got to the hotel, set up for my online class, showed up for my online class. Everything went well. But a big piece of it was I anticipated those things that were going to derail me during the day. And I tried to mitigate them as best I can. Understanding sometimes there's no golden ticket on this thing. So, there was a book written by the vice president of Facebook when her husband passed away. Sherry, I lost her name. Senior moment here, lost her name. But, she talked about losing her husband unexpectedly.
Yeah.
And how tragic that was. And it was such a tragic story.
Sandberg. Sheryl Sandberg,
yes.
Okay.
And, and she said, somebody came up to her in the hallway and said, like, how you doing? And she said, this wasn't my plan A. And they basically said, then you need to kick the crap out of plan B. And so imagine what it would be like if you decided, hey, listen, since I can't control plan A, what could plan B and C look like? And what would those do to help me better navigate, the storm that's going on around me? How many people, I would say even in the coaching community in the early days of the pandemic said, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose all this business. Hey, guess what? Business picked up. Because people at home were starting to think about like, I need a coach to help me figure out what's next for me. I'd like to talk to somebody about like, what should I be thinking about career-wise? Maybe I go back to school. I'd like somebody to help me noodle through that. What about my life? Like this idea of going back to work in the workplace, I don't want to do it. What are my other options? So this coaching schools picked up, coaching picked up. And so rather than scarcity, it actually became a place of, of a lot of business versus less business. And it's been fascinating to talk to other coaches out there. Is they're having the same experience? Is it when we're left at home,
some have suffered
all those things?
Some, of course, have suffered that couldn't adjust fast enough. Restaurants, plenty have suffered that have to be there. But yep, my marketing business grew 40% overnight.
Well, and if you watch the restaurants, though, I said in the very beginning days, as the shutdown occurred, I said to my husband, those companies that cannot reimagine their business practices in this space will not thrive. And so, some of the best restaurants in Louisville set up these carryouts. And I'm telling you, and Louisville, Kentucky is a foodie town. People here go out to eat.
I think it's the greatest per capita in terms of people that go to restaurants of any city in the U.S.
Doesn't surprise me. So some enterprising person got online and set up a Louisville takeout Facebook page. And you could only give positive reviews. Okay. So if you didn't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all, which is an interesting place to be. Because we seem to default to the negative a lot. But I got to tell you, I found out about restaurants I had no idea about. And so what happened is if we're out and about, and I see something, I'll say, oh, I read about that on Facebook. Let's just go try that place. I saw something about that on Facebook. And so it's opened our eyes to tremendous possibilities. But those that reimagine themselves, not as a dine-in place, but as a carry-out place, all of a sudden we're thriving beyond belief. And so it's redefining your space, right? Those companies that could only see themselves with their employees sitting at desks with the manager standing over them with the row or die, kind of management style, didn't thrive. And the employees that have gone home to work that come from those environments aren't going back. And so the question is, how do you develop the workplace now that accommodates this new mentality? Which actually means you've got to give up control. You cannot control the change that's going on. And so if you can't control the change, what do you have to do to be with the change in a way, that works? And so it's digging deep sometimes and asking, like, what's going on here? I mean, what's going on externally, but what's going on internally?
Mhm.
And that's where the coaching space gets really interesting, because the coaching space is more about the internal than it is the external always. Like, how are you with this? What's in your way with this? Because this, it exists. You can't change it, but you can change how you are with it if you understand what's going on.
I think if you really look into it, look deeply into it, I don't think there's really any conclusion other than we have very little control over our environment. It's only our reaction that we have control over. If we really are honest with ourselves about reality. My partner,
Well,
Isabella, has
yeah.
a favorite saying, life is unpredictable. And of course, she says it at just the wrong time, you know.
You know, I always say there's best laid plans and then there's life. And life will always get in the way of the best laid plans. And so the real resilience that comes out of people is, how do you pivot? How do you adjust? You know, how do you make a silk purse out of a sow's ear? I mean, that's really the challenge of having that life that's, you know, there's what I think you would call, you know, a happy life. I mean, define your happiness. What does happiness look like? And what does a full life look like? You know, I've talked to people in career counseling or career coaching many times. And my question to them is, so what, you know, at the end of your career, what does success look like to you? How will you define success? Because there's no wrong answer. Is it, I made gazillions of dollars? Is it, I was, you know, CEO, you know, deluxe? Or, you know, or what is your, you know, what is your success measure? Understanding that everybody has their own. You know, what do you want on your epitaph? You know, what do you want on your tombstone? What do you want it to be? Because if you take the long term, it's amazing how you start to tap into what your values are around things, and you start to live your values in a way that is, it takes a lot of the pressure off about keeping up with that guy. You know, did I honor my values in this decision? You know, did I go on Facebook and badmouth that restaurant because somehow or other my soup was a little bit colder than I liked it? Or did I just say, you know what, this guy's, their day is a little off kilter. Soup still tastes good. I like it hotter. I'll live. You know, what's my position going to be? Is it to complain constantly, or is it to look for the right side? Think about going into a restaurant and you get the new server. So the temptation, like, give this person a tip that's like below 15%, because frankly, it's just been like a train wreck of an event, is overwhelming unless you put it in perspective. So the last time I was new at a job, how did it go? You know, and would people have given me a 15% tip? You know, my first couple of days on the job, I dare say no. So you know, that it's that perspective. What can't you change? And then how are you with that space of what you can't change, what you can't control? And I think, you know, if you start to get into that place of like, okay, so if I can't control it and the change is inevitable, then what do I need to be with it? You know, what do I, and it might be, what do I need to let go of to be with it?
I came upon a term actually this weekend in some reading. I won't go into the context of the article, but I'm curious to see if you had heard of it, if you've heard of it. And I had not before it came up here. And the term is radical acceptance. Have you heard the term?
Yeah, I've heard of it before. I mean, you know, radical acceptance, I'm not sure how that differs from acceptance. Okay. Because that's actually kind of the last stage of this whole, you know, things I can't control in a change. I mean, I must accept that I can't control it. So, I mean, so how does radical acceptance is like amplifying the term acceptance. Well, I'm going to radically accept it. Well, how does that look different from accept it?
I guess maybe to me, it's about looking at the corners of my life where I am still, and I've been working on this with
Good.
with my practice for a long time, and finding those wormholes where I'm still doing it. And I think that it's about finding those edge cases where you're still doing it, even though you know it's not helpful, realistic for you or for the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And it's those, I think it's also those silly things that, and you know, the things that we criticize, especially our loved ones, about are the things that we fondly reminisce about at the funeral. You know, oh, her shoes. Oh my God, she bought shoes and closets full of shoes. And it was a major irritant. And it sort of reminds me, I did an exercise. My mom died about 7 years ago. I'm not for sure.
Yeah.
And we had a very conflictual relationship. And I'm sure it's because we were very similar personality types.
Typically, yes.
And she was, I think she had been diagnosed with her last illness. And I imagined what my feelings would be towards her when she was gone. And this was way before she was gone. And I noticed that just that exercise helped soften me about her in the latter years. So it's those types of things that I think take maybe it's a radical effort at acceptance. Not,
well,
I don't know.
I mean, and that's a really good point, because I mean, you know, I think about in the very early days of the pandemic when people were like, you know, running over the top of each other to get to toilet paper. You know, I remember watching the news about this toilet paper and saying to myself, when this is all over, when it's over, I want to be able to look at my behaviors and say, I honored my values. And for my behaviors to be something that I was proud of versus something that I was shameful about. Okay.
During one of the most difficult external situations that we go through.
So, you know, so somebody posts on Facebook, there's toilet paper at Kroger, whoosh, the swarm, right? And then whoosh, the swarm. It was like that movie, if you've ever seen like Generation Z or something, you know, with Brad Pitt with the zombies take over. Like, I mean, that was like the image I had in my mind. And, you know, and they show pictures of like these people like trampling little old people to get to toilet paper. I mean, they had to set up special hours for the elderly to go shopping. I mean, one, it was about lack of exposure to the virus, but the other part of it was not getting trampled in the toilet paper aisle. Okay. I mean, seriously. And when did toilet paper become the sign that you were going to be like somehow or other like barricaded from the, you know, the virus? I mean, you're going to build castles around you. But nonetheless, the bigger piece of it for me was, you know, I want to be proud of my behaviors. I don't want to look back and say, you know, I was only about me in this space. Because that's not who I am. And a situation like that can change you to that. But is that the change you want?
And not that you clawed over a little old lady at Kroger to get the toilet paper.
I mean, so, you know, here's the reality about toilet paper. It's like, you can live without it. You know, that's it. You can live without it. People do all over the world. And you know what? And they still live. It's just this idea that it was, you know, it was like something to be coveted all of a sudden, you know, and controlled and like hoarded. It just, you know, unleashed this, you know, this kind of beast. And all I can think is like, in this change that's going on, here's who I don't want to be. You know, I don't want to be that. whoever that is. I want to be who I am now, which if somebody came up and said, I'm out of toilet paper, I'd give them my last roll and say, I got one here, you can have mine. And so who do you want to be? And I think that's a big question about who do you want to be in this change? And some of that requires knowing who you are already. Who are you? What are your values? How do you show up every day to the people around you? And is that who you want to be? Because if it's not, you talk to a coach. And that's all there is to it. And get to the bottom of who you are and who you want to be, because that's what coaching is all about. And then what are you willing to put in place to become that person? Because it matters. And you talking about imagining life without your mother changed your perspective on who you were with your mother. That's huge. So you now have the knowledge that your time with your mother was well spent because of the way you were with your mother. And you don't have regrets about what you might have missed.
And it helped with not having a shock of transition. It's about preparation too.
Yeah, I don't know that we're ever prepared for loss. I mean, because there is a finality to it. I mean, and those of faith believe that, it's not the last time, that there will be, a reunion that will come. But there's still this idea of, I don't want to wait for that reunion. I still want them here because it's the comfort of having them here too. But what an honor it is to have been able to touch in with your values and be the son to your mother that she needed at that time.
Let me bring it to Thrive and get your thoughts on it. Because I was in a conversation with a great international organization. Let me give them a plug. Colive.org. Co-living is exploding worldwide, mainly due to the housing affordability crisis. Right. But there are also people that are really becoming, and I think the pandemic has helped this, that some people who did not value community that much and living in community now see what it's like to not have it. So I think there's even, when we come a little further out of it, going to be even greater value. Although now I think we're in that phase where we're just learning to manage it, whatever the level is, and increase those who believe in it, increase their protection for themselves and others. And anyway, so we were in this discussion about the vision of founders of a co-living community and how to maintain the core values of a community as you have people coming in and out, as you're building it. And I definitely have, as the founder of Thrive, I definitely have a vision that gets clearer and clearer. And I spend a decent part of my day, if I'm on my walk, sometimes if I'm in the shower, envisioning what it's like to be there, and different aspects of it. And so I put a lot of thought and energy into the creation of it. In fact, we've been working on a master plan, new master plan with more in-depth plans. And as I was sitting out doing some imagining on a lake, I like to get near water to do my imagining. I realized that I'm taking on the role, at least in this role, as a social architect. And that please me.
Mhm.
But anyway, so the quandary that we were discussing and that I'll present to you relating to change is that, especially with Thrive, where I and the others who are embracing this value making decisions by consensus.
Mm.
We're talking about in our master plan, we're envisioning 75 people, 50 residences, 75 people. So making every important decision that can be planned ahead by consensus presumes a lack of control.
Yeah, my eyebrows
So,
went up. You want to notice? Like, oh, okay.
so
Um,
how to maintain the vision and the cohesion and what was unique about this concept as it's evolving and as it involves 75 plus human beings being empowered to make decisions is quite challenging.
yeah, and you've talked to other communities about how it's played out. What are the differences in what you're planning versus what you've heard about before?
Well, there are quite a bit of differences, quite a lot of differences, because most of them have a founder who is the financier.
Yeah.
Or answers tightly to a financier.
So he who holds the money makes the decisions.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas in this case, we're looking at a co-op legal structure and financial structure. So there will be 75 owners.
So when you think about it, it's essentially not a whole lot different than a homeowners association.
Then
where you have
what?
a board, and the board is elected. You're kind of getting back into the democratic process, right? Then the board is elected to make decisions for the whole, right? As opposed to 75 individuals and everybody gets to have their say. You got to feed it up to a point where there's a manageable kind of constituency elects somebody to be there.
Actually, so that's representative democracy,
Yeah.
but in the Thrive Master Plan, I won't go into too much detail, but it's about creating 5 different pods, whatever grouping, whatever you want to call the grouping. And we've got a decision that needs to be made. There'll be some information sent out to each of those groups. They will meet and attempt to arrive at consensus. There'll be a board member or 2 in each of the pods, and then they will come together and work towards consensus from what the groups decided, and then send it back to the groups for approval on the final tweak, because it won't look the same as when it came up.
So there's a couple of things that go on in this space. There's the what and there's the how, right? The what is that thing you want done. The how is the people that get it done. And so a big piece of it is going to be envisioning, what's the perfect resident of this place versus somebody who's looking for cheap housing, right? Is there a personality that is more inclined to be participative and not
have to control
more? Well, so it's actually more community minded. Okay, because there's a community minded piece to this. It can't be the good of the individual, it's got to be the good of the community. And so is there, how are you going to screen for those persons and those personalities to come into your community? Because just any old person isn't going to work there.
Right.
Because you can't take the human out of the human. And so it sounds to me like there's a couple of things that you will have to control going into this thing.
Mm-hmm.
Who's there, right? Because you can put all the structure you want in place, but if you've got a person who doesn't get along, they're going to upend your consensus because they're going to constantly be the one that says no. That's always driving toward their own goal or their own means or their own wants with no view whatsoever about the collective. And so maybe then you redefine the what is the collective, the how are the humans. How do you get the right humans engaged in the what?
And that takes me back to radical acceptance. I think it will take, and I think that's the biggest possible Achilles heel in a concept like this, is finding people who want to practice, and practice is the operational word there, radical acceptance, because, and that this is why I think, as in general, we live more separately than we're envisioning with Thrive, because our rational minds discriminate, and just like we're seeing with this pandemic, we're dividing lines. We're talking about behavior that's acceptable and unacceptable, and we are shunning each other over really fine lines. And
well, so it's really hard to like walk around with the idea of in a world where everything is right and everything is wrong, what's here right now. I mean, because what's right here right now is me. Okay. And what do I want right now? And can I put my needs, I mean, back to my comment about I want to be proud of my behaviors. Can I put my needs second to the needs of the others, right? Or am I going to think I'm smarter, wiser, more something or othered than, than that guy there, because he doesn't really know. I know everything. I mean, how do you get that group of people together that are like-minded enough? And they don't have to be samey, but they need to be like-minded enough that they're looking at the good of the organizational structure and the good of the whole versus just the good of the me. That's going to be the selection process of those that come into the community, which again is going to be controlled. So I guess maybe my thought on this is, you said, what are you going to have to give up? Well, I mean, I think the question is for you, what do you give up to get what you want? And what do you keep to get what you want? And maybe mindfully, like making the list of, here's the things I know I'm going to have to try to control, because you can't control people. Because here's the thing, you could bring somebody in one day and they're just, they're all in and everything is fine. And then guess what happens? They have some sort of an event. They get sick. They have some sort of a psychiatric breakdown. They, their wife leaves them, their husband leaves them. They have a death in the family and everything changes for them. And all of a sudden the person you thought you had, look at how many divorces there are out there. Look at how many friendships break up. The person you thought they were isn't the person they were. But now they're a part owner of this larger organization. How do you live with that?
And I don't think that's the reason I don't think you can successfully screen. You can't know, because we're different at different stages of our lives.
So then what you wind up doing is saying, can you be voted out of the collective?
And that'll be, for the owners, that'll be difficult. I think if let me just test this out.
Yeah.
If I define the parameters, and the parameters are not, they're the least restrictive that they can be, and the most tolerant of differences, I think it boils down to, in an interview, this is going to, do you want to make the effort? And it's going to take a lot of effort to live in community. How important is that to you? And that it will require, just seeing what it requires to be in a marriage or a partnership, an intimate partnership with one person in the same family, and some kids, we see how hard that is, because we distinguish and we discriminate, and I do this, and they do this. So I think it'll require radical acceptance, because we also want to not only live and make decisions cooperatively, but we want to support and empower each other to be our best selves. So it's not just passive acceptance, it's active promotion of your best self, being and creating your best self. So I think we just, and that's why I'm working on these edge cases that I have not conquered before, because I do want to live in such a community, and I know it'll be challenging, not just for me as founder, but for me as an individual living in such a
and that's great insight into you, because because there's that utopic piece, right? But guess what about utopia? It's kind of like beauty. It's all in the eye of the beholder. It's all in the eye of the beholder. So while you might think it's a utopic experience, there might be others that go like, this is terrible. I don't want to live here. I don't get to, I don't want meatloaf for dinner, and it's meatloaf night and everybody else voted for meatloaf. I don't like meatloaf. So you can wind up with, with the people that just, it's like, I went along with it as long as I could. And then the day came and I was like, I hate meatloaf.
Fuck meatloaf.
Yeah, I know, right?
The saving grace is that everybody has their own kitchen, their own bathrooms, and if we have community dinners, which we would, there'll be a night or two a week or a lunch or two, and you don't have to come. You can eat in your own place all the time if you want.
So here's the thing about that then, but then you get labeled as that person who doesn't want to participate in the community. See, because we humans, we want to control those things, okay, that we can control. And in the absence of anything else, we'll just try to control other humans. And so part of it is, how do you, and I think, what you're talking about is really, really, exciting in so many ways, for particularly people that, the affordable housing piece of it obviously is really exciting. But the other part of it is people who need community, but don't know how to find community. And so that community support piece is really, really important. But how do you make sure that they're good fits for the system, and they're not the people that are going to cause the system to explode? And because we know how that happens.
Yep.
So it's what control do you need to have, Mark? And what do you let go of with respect to control? And some of that is the thought into what this utopian place looks like. And so what are the personality types that need to be there? So what do you screen for? What do you just leave to chance?
And self-selection is usually the best way. Now, do we have blind spots? Absolutely. So that'll be the first one, and probably an interview, but to make sure that people understand this is what you're signing up for. And are you up for that challenge?
Well, and I might challenge you a little bit on that self-selection piece. I led a team one time in my final days at the organization, and so it was really on this, it was very forward-thinking team, and and the deputy director said to me, like, well, do you want me to put out a call for people to join your study group, this group? And I said, nope. He looked at me, he goes, what? I said, I want people who are in this space, who know other people in this space, to help me bring together a group of people that know about what we're talking here, versus people that are looking for ways to avoid their day jobs. They just want to be part of something, but don't want to contribute. What I want is the people that are already in the space, that have got a lot of thinking and a lot of ideas around what we're doing, to come together into this place. And so I would say that participation in the group will be by invitation only.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe, maybe that's a different way to think about it.
And here's another challenge that I'm going to put before the group, and that is, not only do I want us to come together to make decisions when the community exists, but I want to gather this group to create the community. So even before it exists,
That's right.
to have that buy-in. So,
Yeah.
so making those decisions on creating the community,
Yeah.
so that it's what the group wants it to be, instead of my vision. And then, then there's criticism of it. So, and I think that building the community together by consensus will give us the training wheels for living together by consensus.
No, I think that's great because it does take practice, right? And it does take work because most of us are going in position is my way or the highway. I mean, that's, when you start a negotiation, it's like, I've got a number. Have you guessed it yet?
Yeah.
Nope, that's not it. So I keep going. You'll get it. Just keep going. So, I mean, I really admire what you're doing, but there's a lot of, it's not by happenstance that it will be successful. It will be
so as we wind up here, any other thoughts, anecdotes about this topic? And I think it's a critical one for any era, but I think it's especially critical now. Other thoughts about it?
Yeah, I think, a big piece of it is, we talk a lot about the extrinsic versus the intrinsic. I mean, the reality is this whole change thing is happening external. And the question then to ask yourself is, how am I with this change? Not what can I control about this change? How am I with this change? And how do I need to be to navigate successfully through this change? I mean, people are having heart attacks all over the place right now. Okay, because the stress of what's been going on is tremendous. And we all know stress is a problem.
Overdoses, drug use,
suicides. I mean, it's this, I can't be with this. Therefore, like, I'm just out of here. Like, check, I'm done.
How about domestic violence? Do we know how that's done?
I think that's a study for afterwards. I think what we'll see is there was much more than, because the mechanisms for assistance weren't there. I think a lot of the violence we're seeing is basically an offshoot of it. This, I got to control something because everything else is out of my control. So the question then to ask yourself is like, how do I need to be with this? Because it will end. It will end. How do I need to be with it to thrive so that I can be there at the end, ready to move forward still? And that's, and so ask yourself, like, what's going on with me right now? Like, many of us are living in our heads, right? It's like the woulda, shoulda, couldas. Listen, what's going on with me right now? How am I in this place? Do I feel stuck? Do I need to talk to a professional? Do I need to talk to a counselor? Do I need a psychiatrist? Do I need a psychotherapist? Do I need a coach? Do I need a doctor? Do I need a clergyman? Who do I need? And have those and you know what? And if you've got somebody else there, ask them, how am I right now? Because I think the best relationship you can have is when you look at your partner and say, like, hey, there's something happening here. And we need to address this with the right kind of help.
How about silver linings? Does that help in situations like this? And let me just give you one, and then let's talk about it in general. In my work and with co-living, I'm dealing on a regular basis with people from all over the world. And not only are the conversations the same with family, in the same town, but the conversations are the same everywhere in the world simultaneously. What's it like? Are you on lockdown? What are your freedoms? what percentage of the people are wearing masks? It's the same conversation.
Exactly.
And it's, in a way, I think it's brought us closer together in terms of empathy in that way.
So it's brought like-minded people together, but it separated us from people that aren't like us. Okay, that aren't like-minded. And so here's the reality of this whole thing. It's going to end. Okay, I mean, that's the big reality. And I, I told you before we went online. I mean, I'm a Pollyanna of the first order. I am an optimist, eternal optimist about things because history shows me, and I love history, that it'll end. Okay, the 1918 pandemic, we're not still living it. We're in the 2020 pandemic. Okay, the 2019 pandemic. We're not living the 1918 pandemic. So it ended. This is going to end too. And then we'll move on to whatever the next big thing is, because that's kind of how we're wired. I mean, we're wired to survive. I mean, that's how we're created, to survive. So we will survive. The bigger question is, what do you need to let go of in order to survive? And then what help do you need to seek in order to survive? Because that's it. There's the old, man is not an island unto himself, right? And so, we are built to be part of a group. I mean, the Thrive community speaks very much to our nature to need to be part of a herd. I mean, that's who we are. The animal that doesn't stay in the herd gets eaten. That's the way it works. So we're already geared toward that. Where you find yourself being separated from the herd, it's time to ask yourself, what's going on with me? Because that's just not who we are. And those that get too far separated mentally or physically are the ones that we're, that we're the most concerned about right now, to be perfectly honest with you. So because there is an epidemic of loneliness going on.
This has been an unusual conversation for us. It's more internal, excuse me, internal than external. And I've appreciated it. And I think a lot of people are thinking about these sorts of things. So,
but I think what Thrive, promotes, this idea of a community, is something that is very, very appealing in this time of, of really, I mean, we're all sitting in our houses on Zoom, for crying out loud. So, if you're fortunate enough to have people with you that, that bolster you and support you, you're fortunate indeed. Not everybody is as blessed. And so I think, I count my blessings every day. I'm grateful.
So if someone wanted to reach out to you for coaching,
right,
whether it be of a personal nature or business, how would they best find you? So
I have a website. It's stithcoachingandconsulting.com. And there's a contact form there, or bbstith608@gmail.com is my email. We can have a conversation. If I'm not the coach for you, I know a lot of coaches. And so we're not a one size fits all community, but I'm happy to talk to people that are looking for coaches and see if we'd make a good fit. And if not, I know a lot of people that do coaching that are really good. And I can certainly refer them out to other places.
Wonderful.
So, okay.
And we'll put that in the show notes.
I appreciate that.
So that they can just click on it and get to you.
Okay.
And let's keep talking offline, and let's bring it online from time to time. Maybe we'll go back to a world events type
I know
of topic.
You're dying on this Ukraine thing. I know you are. So all right. But wait, watch the Olympics. So there you go. That's all I'll say.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. And you know what? Let me make a personal appeal to you and to the audience. I don't know how many people are aware of this division of Amazon called Smile, Amazon Smile. And you can, if you're not supporting a not-for-profit, and would like to support our efforts on the podcast and for the creation of Thrive, you can designate us as your favorite charity on Amazon, and a portion, I don't know what portion, but a portion of your purchases goes to us.
That's great.
The way to do it is to go to smile.amazon.com, and it'll ask you, if you're not signed up with somebody, it'll ask you what you want, which one you want. And our legal name is colivingcommunities.org. So you would choose that. And then all you have to do is be sure that instead of logging into the regular amazon.com, you log into Smile. And quite often it'll ask you, if you've forgotten, hey, do you want to log into Smile? You have this as your favorite charity. Okay. And you say yes, and it'll take you there. So that is I think that's the least painful way somebody could support us. And if you have another favorite charity, do it. Support somebody, and they and we'll be grateful. Yeah. So it's really quick and easy, and it'll help us or someone else. So
great. Thank you for that information.
Thanks for letting me do the plug. Yeah. And thanks everybody. And we'll see you. We're now doing podcasts on a weekly basis. And if you want to sign up for podcast notices, go to our website at thrivecolivingcommunities.org and sign up there. All right. Thanks, Bonnie. See you next time. Thanks for joining us for another great episode of the Thrive Co-Living Communities YouTube podcast. To learn more about our mission and how you can support our vision of creating co-living communities worldwide, please visit us at thrivecolivingcommunities.org. To receive advanced viewings of our podcast and other exclusive content, find us on Patreon at patreon.com/Thrive Co-Living Communities. You can also learn more ways to support our mission in the show notes below. Amazon, Smile, GoFundMe, Kroger, and our own Thrive Gear store, where you can buy t-shirts, hats, and many other items. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon.